certainly want to thank everybody for this season from your guys' perspective, from the professionalism that that you've shown. Obviously, it was a historic year in many ways. Obviously, for the franchise, getting the President's Trophy is certainly something that we're proud of. But obviously, there's still work and steps to be done. I think as we go through the process of talking about some different things, you'll hear that and some common themes that were in the exits, with the players. As a coaching staff and management staff, we still need to get together and unpack a few things and digest a few things. So some of those things will we'll kind of unfold as we go. We may not have all the answers for you here yet, because there's still lots of dissection that will go on with us here. But again, to a man, everybody certainly was looking for more, and it's incumbent upon us to try to continue to try to take those next steps. So thanks.
I want to say this before too. I wanted to everyone here, thank you my first year for your professionalism. The softballs that you threw at me sometimes there, appreciate that. Not Kenny, you too, you're involved in that. But at the end of the day, I really appreciate it. Obviously, this year, a lot of great things happen. We all wish that we were playing tonight instead of having to watch it. But at the end of the day, you guys play a part in what happens here. With us, obviously, how the message comes out, how it, with our fan base and the city and the province and all our Jet fans and obviously the players themselves. But we did a lot of great things this year. No one's really satisfied with what we've done, but at the end of the day, it's we did some really, some things that we can be very proud of.
So for both of you gentlemen, then, knowing what you do now before the major dissection starts, the areas that you excelled at in the regular season, and that you weren't able to repeat that in the playoffs, and I don't think that's maybe to be expected, but is there a big lesson that is learned here? As much as you achieved during the regular season, that there is still much to achieve at the playoff level, because certainly from the statistics, and if you look at 5-on-5 hockey power play, getting the leads after 40 minutes and that sort of thing, those things just did not happen with the same regularity.
Well, I think every season takes on its own life. There's no question about it, and every season kind of has seasons within it. You have obviously you come to training camp, you lay a foundation in place. That's what the coaches do, and the coaches and players get on the same page to start off on that foundation, and then you get into the first part of the season. You keep going up until whatever Christmas time or the trade deadline, and then it changes again. You have to shift gears, and the game starts changing itself as well. And obviously, you play the 82 games to get your foundation in place, to understand your team, to go through adversity at different points in time, how you come out of it, try different things, see different things. Then the playoffs are a life of their own, and every series is a life of their own. So again, it's getting through that first round is obviously a major hurdle for every year for 8 teams. We talk about at training camp, eliminating 8 or obviously 16 teams get eliminated just in fact to make the playoffs, and that should never ever be taken for granted. It doesn't matter what organization you're in. You have to earn your right to get to the playoffs, and then you have to earn your right to get through the different rounds. And again, we talked about it a lot, and Arnie coined the phrase quite a bit. It's about the moments when you come into playoffs. Every single moment matters, and the momentum from games to games, not necessarily there. It's the momentum within the games, and those are created by moments. So I think, in talking to the guys, again, those common themes is just understanding how important, each and every detail is, from game to game is what you learn, is what you grow. Obviously, there's several teams that are participating right now that have, been there before, and that's what we want to get to. We want to get to that point where you have the battle scars, you have the knowledge that again you know what to expect and what it's going to take to go beyond that next level. And again, to a man, we talked about last year sitting here. We talked about the playoff series and, maybe missed opportunity, what's left on the table. We need to go back home this summer and that summer and get X% better. And we said to them, you did. You took the homework assignment and you came back. We had a good start. We had a good base to a year, but there's got to be more. And, that's the beauty of sport, is you get challenged. And, we're fortunate we have a real strong core of guys that are going to push, pull, and prod. A lot of different guys that are, on the good side of 30, I guess, in the sense that there's still capacity for them to grow. That's the group of guys that, we're going to, challenge to, help take us to that next level. And again, we can't be underestimated. We have the best goaltender in the world. And, for us, that's an important thing, for us to keep building on.
Well, for me, kind of, Kelly, towards your question there, the 82 games for me, go over the course of the season, whether that's, your goals against average or your goal for, whether that's your power play, penalty kill, like you said, there's things that you do maybe analytically you're really good at, both with and without the puck. Playoffs are a different animal. The sole thing about the playoffs is you have to win games. And to me, whether we got blown out in a game like we did in St. Louis, or we got in a game like Game 7, or we got into a game like we had in Game 4 down in Dallas, where it was a game that, in my opinion, we should have won. To me, it's the moments, like Chevy just mentioned, that the playoffs, you just win hockey games. Teams that have the best penalty kill aren't playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs, or may not be playing right now. There may be the best 5-on-5 team. There might be scenarios where that, when it comes to the playoffs, it's a different game, and all it is about is winning your series. It's winning those games, and however that comes about, whether you score 4 power play goals or your penalty kill does something, or you limit the other opposition to limited opportunities to be in your end of the rink. It's only about winning. It's only about winning. That Game 6 for us in Dallas, that was a game to be won. And you know what? We were one shot away from accomplishing that, and that's all that mattered. All we cared about was getting home for Game 7. And at the end of the day, I don't care what the analytics are. There's things that our staff, my staff, we will look at. We're going to go over, and we are going to look at, so that we run into this situation next year, that we do score that next goal that wins that game, that gets us to win a series, to move on to the next round, so that we can be playing tonight. But to me, there's the biggest thing, and it's what I've kind of stressed with our group all year long, is that you learn over the course of 82 to play at this time of year, because it is another animal. It's a different game, and there's lessons to be learned over those 82 games. There's things you have to do nightly during that time. But when you get into these playoffs, I think our group has learned a lesson. They've learned on both positive and a negative side of things what it takes at this time of year. And real proud of our group. We went through some really, really emotional, and I'm not talking about our last game. I'm talking about emotional things that happened prior to Game 6 in Dallas. Things that, just the emotion of winning that Game 7, the downside of those games in St. Louis, us not being, at our best for Game 1 against Dallas in our building and gave them home ice. So there's a lot of things for me that happened over the course of this playoffs that are extreme positives. There's some things, again, that we're going to have to grill our group on and get better at, so that we hit this again next year, that we're better prepared for it to have the outcome fall in our favor.
Scott, I was reflecting on maybe some of the exit interviews since you've been an associate coach, and this team's taken steps forward from, prior to your arrival, missing the playoffs, then the pushback year, then the Colorado year. You guys accomplished so much, and I wonder if there's a sense that it feels like you've climbed a mountain, and now that you're at a peak, you look up and you're like, hey, wait a second, there's another couple levels to this. So how do you get those fight for the middle, manage those moments like you're talking about, How do you take that to the next level with this group?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing we talked about, we just finished our one-on-ones with all the players. We haven't had it as an organization yet, but we got to talk to all the players. And the first thing we did is that we complimented them and told them how proud we were of the year we had, the things that we accomplished as a group. Just the fact that we won the President's Trophy, that we were consistent for 82 games, that we did all those things. We had individual players have career years. A lot of things that we had young players that matured and took a step forward. But you're right. We got here and we're not playing tonight. We're not playing Edmonton tonight, and we haven't achieved what we're all trying to achieve, and that's to win the Stanley Cup. And if you're not in this game to do that, I'm not really sure why you're playing, because that's why I'm here. That's why Chevy keeps doing it. That's why our ownership has a commitment that they do. It's the players. It's what our group, just listen to our players talk about how disappointed they are right now after all the great things that have happened, how disappointed they are that we're not playing tonight. And that's good to hear, but it also means we have a reset. Like last year, and like you mentioned, those other years, there was big learning, just learning what playoff hockey actually means. This year we learned it, we lived it, we grew through it. But it's our goal now is to win the Stanley Cup. Now we know we've done a lot of good things. Now we know what it takes. We still have more to do, and as a staff, as the players, these guys are all going home with that mentality, and we're going to follow up on this all summer long, so that when we get to training camp, that's part of our objective. Is that we're watching these teams that are playing right now. These 4 teams have great experience at this time of year, and how did they get it? How did they get to where they are right now? To see Carolina, see Florida, see Edmonton, see Dallas. These guys have been here, and they've been here, and we just have to look in our division. Dallas has been here for a number of years now. So, so for us, we want to be one of these groups. We scratched the surface this year, so it's now about what happens moving forward.
And I'll just, I guess, add a little bit to that. Sitting here last year at this time, obviously it was 2 weeks earlier, but we were in very different circumstances. Obviously, Bones had retired, and we were looking for the next head coach of the Jets, and I just sitting here going through the exits. Last year I went through the exits by myself. We had the management, and you're going through it. There's a lot of, I guess, questions by the players, like who's going to be the boss, who's going to be coaching, what kind of systems are we going to play, are we going to mesh? And I think the advantage that we have here is listening, with Arnie talking, like, we were fortunate to have Arnie here. He knew the players, he could develop a plan, but now he's coached them for a year. He's got, their levels of expectations of themselves. He's, the exit meetings really have just been put on pause. Like, the coaching staff, Arnie's going to have, one-on-ones with all these players during the summer that are much more extensive than the 15 or 20 minutes, that you have allotted for them, here today. So just that ability, not to try to get up to speed, but now to be up to speed, but push it forward, I think is an advantage for us this summer.
Lots of big picture thoughts there. I'll pivot to a specific one. Your guys really showed up in the media for saying, hey, Nikolai Ehlers, we love him, what a teammate, all of that sort of stuff. Now he's an unrestricted free agent, and some uncertainty there. What can you tell us about his future with you?
Well, obviously he's at the World Championships right now. I talked to him the other day when he was going over. We haven't had the ability to sit down, with him like we had with with the other players. Nino as well. Nino's over there, so we'll finish that process when they're done. I did get a chance. Nikolai's agent was in town here. We met probably for about 2 hours on, I don't know what day it was, the off day, Monday, I guess, when we had an off day, in those regards. So, we chatted. Obviously, Nikolai's been a player that's grown up in our organization, drafted, developed him, someone that we think the world of. We obviously went into this year eyes wide open that he was a potential unrestricted free agent. Players earn that opportunity, and when we get a chance, to talk to him, we'll put our best foot forward with him to to try to make our case to be one of those guys that can be a unique Jet for life type player, and you know, we'll see where it all goes there. But the relationship is great. You know, and he did contribute to the success of this organization on many fronts, and we hope that that's something that can continue. And you know, if he does choose to go in a different direction, then obviously as an organization we'll have to you know, evolve, and as we have in the past with other things, and you know, it'll be another opportunity for us to grow in a different area.
Kevin, going back to the trade deadline, obviously you couldn't have anticipated some of these key injuries that came up, and there's so many of them in the playoffs with star players. But there was obviously some banked or accrued salary cap space. Obviously, you tried to do some things. Looking back now, is there anything you would have tried to do differently, whether it was other moves or some of that depth?
Yeah, you know, again, obviously the cap works in a lot of different ways. You know, earlier in the year, you know, before you get to the deadline, you look at maybe doing some different things as well, but you don't have the cap space that, you know, teams that are maybe an LTI, you know, at that point in time, you know, can do, and you know, that's just a function of the way the system, you know, is. Obviously, you know, you manage the year judiciously as you can to try to have cap space, you know, accrue. When it gets to the trade deadline, you know, it's kind of like a box of chocolates. You don't know necessarily what's out there. Like there's there's different opportunities. You know, sometimes there's big money players that are there, and you want to have that ability to strike. But if there's, you know, you don't have the ability to grab one of those, then you know, you move on to, you know, the different aspects of things. I thought, you know, for us, you know, we kind of had a multi-layered plan going into the deadline as to how we wanted to attack it, and wanted to give ourselves, you know, the greatest flexibility that we could, and you know, we were able to add Schenner, we were able to add Tanny, two players that, you know, bring different elements, you know, to a lineup, and I think in various different circumstances, you know, they were very, very helpful in different regards. Like you said, you don't know what happens after the deadline with a couple of injuries, but again, if the players that aren't there to be a fit in your lineup, you know, you don't just go grab a player to shoehorn something, you know, in. I think, you know, we if you look at 2 deadlines ago, and we brought in lots of different players, because one, we did, you know, bring in, you know, Toffoli, and we didn't know where things were at with Gabe, but then when Gabe was healthy and Tyler was healthy, you know, you had Perfetti get to be a casualty of that, and there's an opportunity cost sometimes, you know, whether it's in that playoff or, you know, future playoffs, that you have to be careful of. I think you saw the growth of a player like Cole this year, when he got his opportunity, and you know, if ands or buts, what would that have been like if this was his second playoff as opposed to his first? So you look at all those things, but you know, the fact of the matter is you hope to have cap space, but then, you know, you have to be you know, mindful of what's out there. You don't just spend it for the sake of spending it. If there's not something that fits, then that's just the reality of the situation.
You know, one thing, just being able to be sitting, whether in Jersey, right, Philly, sitting in those, well, that was all going on, the deadline, whatever. The biggest thing that jumped out at me, how many teams were still in the hunt. And that to me, there was so many teams in the hunt this year, in both sides, that really, it was, every time a name came up, there was 6 teams that were interested, or 7 teams that were interested. So it was even more than that at times. And so that was the part for me. It was like, wow, this is a big pond we're in right now.
And then just sort of the follow up on that same theme, looking forward, how do you guys, or can you, change the perception about Winnipeg as a destination to come and play? Because we certainly hear from the players in the room, they love playing here, they rave about it. Guys who are here often re-sign here. Those of us who live and grew up here know what this place is about. But there is that perception, and we know at times there's players that exercise their right to say no. Is that something Winnipeg is always going to have to deal with, or can a season like this and some of the things that happen maybe change that narrative a bit?
Again, it's a great question. I don't know if there's one, standard answer there. I think, again, you go back to no trade lists and stuff like that. A lot of our players have no trade lists and have various teams on them. We don't really ask them why, they may choose the 6 to 8 or 10 teams that they have on it, and they all have them for their own, particular reasons. And certainly that's there. For us, I learned early on, you don't dwell on that. You have to, be able to, run your organization with the sense of pride that you have. And I think our greatest strength kind of came on display here in this last this year in general. Is you want to develop a core of players that care for each other, that play for each other. I've always believed that you do that through drafting them and developing them and growing them and then retaining them, and like I say, for the most part we've been able to do that. In the future we'll see, hopefully that is continuing, but I think it's the players want to win. We have a goaltender that's the best in the world. Players want to play in a fan base that cares. We got some of the most passionate fans, in the league, and I think that you saw that, you see that on display when we get to the playoffs and the whiteouts and the unique things that just ignite a city and a fan base like that. But I think the real thing is that you get that sense of family with this group of guys, and if you're a player around the league, we heard from so many different people outside of our organization, just, again, the caring and compassion that this group has for each other. And you can never force a player to want to play somewhere, but, I know if I were one of them, I'd want to play in a place where, I matter. I matter to the fans, I matter to my teammates, and I matter to the thought of trying to win a Stanley Cup. And in the future there may be guys that don't want to. We'll move on. We'll find the guys that do, and we'll do our best to make this city proud.
Your lack of offense hurt you in the playoffs. Like in 8 of 13 games, you scored just 1 or 2 goals. You went 1-7 in those games. So is that where one addition might have made the difference, and you look back and say, damn it, we could have, should have, would have, either of you?
It's interesting. I can let Arnie weigh in, but again, the goals in the playoffs aren't about the numbers of goals. It's about the timeliness of the goals, and that goes back, maybe to the moments, and the different things like that. It's one of those things where again, you have to learn a lot of things about yourself in the playoffs, and this group earned the right to be together. If there were opportunities where we felt that we could add players that were going to help us win, we were obviously fully prepared to do that. But again, you have to create your own moments, and I think that's something that whether you're a first line player or a fourth line player, that's what playoff hockey is all about, and hopefully the experience that we went through will help those players in future times.
No, I agree. The when it comes to this time of year, it isn't just your top guys that have to score goals. Everybody, just look at these top 4 teams that are still playing. It's depth throughout, and I've stressed it all year long that that for us to have success as a group, it isn't just relying on our power play or relying on our top 6 forwards. And it is an area that we have to grow, that we have to continually get better. And it's something that, the successful teams are the ones that are having, you look at Florida, that third line, what's going on with there. Last year, Edmonton going in the finals, it was their bottom 6 forwards that were so good for Edmonton to get them in that position, and then you see with the other teams as well. And so it's a part of our growth. It's a part of these things that we didn't accomplish, that we didn't get the timely scoring, but we didn't get the depth scoring that we need as well. And that's not putting the heat on just our depth guys, because I think going into last night we were number 2 in points by our defense, which through two series, which is a great stat, but we also need it throughout our lineup. And that's those timely goals. It's those moments that when it is a 1-1 game and we have, before we have to go to overtime against Dallas, we find a way to to get a greasy goal, to get a goal that that we needed at an important time.
Players all have plays they want back. Mason Appleton would be a good example of that one there. Maybe even games they'd want back. As a coach, do you have moments or games or periods that you think, okay, I'd want that one back? I don't know, matchups or lines or something?
I have a whole bunch. You know what? We obviously got off to the start against St. Louis. The game down in there, Game 3. Like I mentioned, I really liked how we played for 30 minutes in Game 4. I didn't like the stretches and the moments that happened in those road games in Games 4 and 6 in St. Louis. There's some things that, whether they were matchups, they're a little harder to do on the road than they are at home. The one that kind of gets me a little bit, and I knew it was coming, was Game 1 against Dallas. Coming off the high of Game 7, I knew that there was going to be that moment where Dallas and their experience and Pete DeBoer was going to push Game 1 at us. He was coming, and they did. We had chances late, especially late in the third, to tie that game up. We didn't. That was a moment lost for us. We played 82 games to get that home ice, and you saw what we did in our building. And so for me, that's one that got away, that first one. I think that just there's moments, there's things that happen. For me, there's areas that you'll look at, whether it's lineup or whether it's matchups or whether it's little things. But at the end of the day, we put ourselves in a position to get home here for Game 7 after having that, not lose, winning Game 1. And it didn't happen. And that's kind of sort of grabs at you. That's the part that kind of, really bothers me a bit about that we didn't get that chance to come home for Game 7, because I liked our chances.
Scott, if being 5 to 10% better was the mission for your club that led to an historic season, what are your early thoughts on what might be your credo to motivate your club to going into the next campaign? Yeah,
like Chevy mentioned today, we had 10 or 15, 20 minutes to talk to every player. The first thing I said to every player is that within 2 weeks here, I'm going to talk to everybody. And I asked Davis and Marty to give me thoughts and ideas on each and every player from this year, for this summer to get better, and then for next year. And then Dean as well did that with our with the D-men, and also those guys both did about the specialty teams. And so I've talked to the players about, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to have more of a in-depth conversation, and it'll be a lot more than 15 minutes. It'll be something that'll and it'll be something that'll be very, very beneficial to both myself and to the player. And then from that point forward, we have passed on, the two of us, through these meetings, is that we're not satisfied about what happened, and that next year our goal is to win a Stanley Cup, and so there's a lot of work to be done. I'm not going to say that's because I haven't really got it together yet on what it is. It's the 5%, 10%. I think it has a little bit more to do with how we played and how we have to play right now, because I hear it from teams that have won. I've heard about, I was in Washington the year after they won. I heard about what they had to do for 4 rounds. And so that's some of the knowledge that I'm going to take from sort of listening and watching some of these past, Cup winners. And that's the stuff that we're going to have to kind of, we were pushing to be that 5 to 10% better. Well, that should be already there. Now it's I don't know what it is. I don't know what that word is. If it's the compete again, it's the grit, it's it's that not giving up an inch. I'm not sure what that is, that message. You guys will hear that in September, but that's part of my homework here with my staff and with the players, is to come up with that.
Kevin, when you said that you want to develop a core of players who care for each other, over the weekend, what was the most impactful thing that you observed in how the group supported Mark, and in your belief that tragedy will lead to growth with them as a group or a family, as they put it?
Yeah, I think, when times are at their lowest, that's when people really show themselves. And, when there's that loss, again, it's one of those days that you're going to sit and remember, for a long time. Arnie called me early in the morning, to let me know that he had just spoken, with Scheif and that. And your mind, obviously we're getting ready to play the biggest game of our year, and your mind just completely turns to something different. And this is the human side of it. I lost my dad when I was 17 years old, and there's not a day that goes by that you don't think about him. So you can never know what a guy's feeling, but to see how our players rallied around Mark. We had it's one thing, as an organization, you do different trips. You have mom's trips, you have dad's trips, and so I've been fortunate to be on some of those. In this particular case, Brad was, someone that, Mark was our first draft pick, and I've known, that family now for over 14 years, and those are things, but you can't talk about being a family. You act like being a family, and I was really proud of how all our players came together, and again, but it's not surprising because as a group this year, that's what it's been about. They've held each other accountable behind the scenes more so than people even know. They've been hard on each other. They've pushed each other. They've argued with each other, but that's that's what you strive for in a team. I don't know that we're going to win the President's Trophy again next year. Obviously those are unique circumstances, but I feel very comfortable sitting here saying that group of players wants it. They want to push. They want to be pushed, and it's interesting, like. Tremendous accolades and kudos should go to Arnie and his staff, for being nominated for the Jack Adams Trophy this year, and it's a well-deserved thing. But and I had the fortune of being able to tell the team that Arnie was being nominated, and what I said to them was, as much as that's an individual coach's recognition, we're like, well, what's the coach's job? The coach's job is to try to get a group of players to come together, to play a certain way, to believe in doing something, to believe in what a coach is preaching, and go and execute it. And so, as much as that's it's Arnie's being recognized, he's being recognized for getting this group to care about each other, play for each other, play a system. And it's interesting because when we would waver, you would see the foundation that gets put in place at training camp by the coaching staff and the players that have bought into that. That's what it's all about. So, again, you play the game on the ice. You win by scoring more goals, by letting up less. At the end of the day, someone wins the game, someone loses the game. But I truly believe that we've got a bunch of winners in that room for how they played that scorecard, on a nightly basis over the course of 100 and some games, including, preseason.
The biggest thing for me, talking about Game 6, and that day, it's not just the game itself. That day was a very long day, but the biggest thing that I had and I knew was that I knew our team, how they were going to handle it. It wasn't like we were walking into something we weren't prepared, in the sense of, because we had been a family, because we had cared for each other. It's been growing here the last few years, and I saw it all year long. And I knew how that was going to get handled. I was 99% sure, and they did. They went above and beyond how they handled that Game 6. From the time everybody found out, when I had to tell them in the morning, to the moment or the time after, after we had lost the game. How they handle it, that's how I knew they would handle it, because they had handled stuff not as severe as that, but they handled it as a group. They cared about each other all year long. There's some things that happened that you guys don't know about that happened over the course of the year that they handled unbelievably well amongst each other, and I'm so proud of them from that point, but also obviously what they did in Game 6 and that day. And obviously it just shows how much they care about each other.
Scott, you've been part of this community since the early 80s, and obviously coaching in with Moose and associate coach here with the Jets. But was it any different this year, your first year as a head coach in Winnipeg?
Yeah, whirlwind. Honestly, seems like yesterday I was sitting here talking to you guys about how thankful I was about getting a second chance. It really is. How fast, I know that it's going to get crazier next year with the Olympics, but just the schedule certainly bought into that or built into that. It was an amazing year, and it's the first thing I did when the players walked in the room was the first thing I did was thank them for helping me in my first year. Every single one of them, whether you played a gigantic role or whether it was a small part. I was so thankful to the players and my staff, management, ownership, for giving me the opportunity. For me, it's a dream come true to be back doing it. But again, I'm still like to see the passion what I saw in the playoffs from our fans. That's why every one of us, every one of these players, and obviously we never got the chance to play that Game 7. We knew we would have won it. But at the end of the day, for me, this is a start of something that I'm hoping ends with us one day, holding that Stanley Cup. And that's, like I said earlier, that's why we're here, and it's what this group wants. And we got to do all the right things to get there. But for me, it's it's maybe a month from now we'll sit back and kind of look at it, and certainly we'll talk about the great things that happened. But at the end of the day, we didn't win. We're not playing Edmonton tonight, and that's the one thing that's still sort of gnawing at me a little bit. But real proud of our hockey team, real proud of certainly all the things that went on over the course of the year. Extremely proud of how they handled Game 6. But it's been quite a year for me.
When we talk about development being such a big part of this team and their growth, and so you had a lot of players obviously with the Moose who took steps forward, but Elias Lindholm, obviously he was a late training camp send down to the Moose, and player rookie of the year, defenseman of the year.
Yeah.
What can you say about his growth and obviously HL All-Star as well?
Yeah, so I met with Elias on Monday as well, and had an opportunity to chat with him about his year, about his experiences coming over, and what he learned, what he knows more about the North American game, and it is a different animal, but he had an exceptional year. Not surprisingly, again, we've been talking about him for several years in different settings like this, that we feel we have a really good one there. Unfortunately, he got a little bit of a setback there with his injury that kept him out a little while there. So, again, the opportunity to evaluate him in the National Hockey League, kind of shifted a little bit as far as, letting him have that opportunity and having the coaches there. I remember 2 years ago when he was at training camp and we had to send him back to Sweden contractually still. I remember Arnie asking me, there's no way we can keep him? There's no way he can stay? Are you sure? And he was running the D at that time, so obviously he was pretty D-centric at that point. But we're excited, and again, I think if he has a really good summer, I think he's someone that could force us to make some big decisions.
We have a role model in front of him, for me, and is that Dylan Samberg. And to me, that's the best part about it, is we have somebody that that we can talk to him about. We might have already talked to him about it, but again, it's just that it's just part of how we got to do it the right way. And the biggest thing, we want to make sure that when he's ready to go, he's ready to go. And we're not force feeding this. And I think he's a good enough hockey player that he'll find his way in.
Yeah, you're fortunate as an organization when you have ability to be able to let the players show you that they're ready, as opposed to you having to put them in a situation and hope that they're ready. Because that's again, we talk about with players, we want you here for a long time, not just a quick minute. You want to be a long time pro.
Do you have an update on Dmitry Brzezinski?
We've had some conversations with his representatives. We actually had a Zoom call with him. Probably we were on the road, so I guess it was Game 4. Larry Simmons and I. He's got some decisions that he has to make. Obviously, we think he'd be a perfect fit in our organization here, and but again, there's lots of different factors that go into their decisions, and we're still hopeful. I don't really have an update per se to say what the chances are, but again, we've had good conversations with them, and I guess we'll just see.
And lastly, Kevin, just you've known Scott for a long time. What's the most valuable lesson you learned as you went back behind an NHL bench for the first time in over a decade here?
Yeah, again, it's interesting. One of the things that really came through, in our exit meetings and talking to some of the players there was, the accountability that he was able to hold the players, to the fairness. That word came out several times, in conversations with the players that, hard but fair. I think as a coach, we talked about it, going in and extensively in the interview process. Communication is such a key thing, when it comes to coaching. And I think even more so with today's players, they want to know why, they want to see why, they want to talk about it. And I think, again, going back to when we made the decision, obviously to ultimately hire Arnie, it was obviously that familiarity and that knowing that he was right for this group here to help push them, and he knew where the strengths and the weaknesses of the players were, and again, I think he's continued to grow. It was interesting watching Arnie interact with his assistant coaches. Some coaches are very autocratic when it comes to, how this is, but, some coaches are very inclusive and then ultimately make the final say. And that was nice to see with Arnie. Was open to, the input of his assistant coaches, but then when it came in the end, there was a boss, and you could tell that. And I think everybody knew that, but probably the most important thing that I've seen was the human side of Arnie is when you want to have develop that family atmosphere, you have to, again, be able to bark at the guy, but then be able to, say good morning and have a cup of coffee with him the next day. And that's an important trait, in today. And I think the guys, respect that. But, more so some of the things that I think that, where as an organization, we have grown. Last year we sat down with our analytics team and decided to try to come up, with a detailed package or way we wanted to present different things to each other, to the coaches, to the management, and continue to find ways how to integrate that with the players. I think, again, we'll probably have 2.0 of that this year with, being able to sit down and say, okay, we like this, we didn't like this, we want to grow this, so, and the openness, from that standpoint, Arnie's a very progressive guy when it comes to that. So, again, I think, just the fact that we're not satisfied, and there's probably no more guy not satisfied right now than Arnie. And knowing that, he's got a detailed, hour plus conversation with each one of those guys, coming forward. Again, everyone will take some time to decompress, and I think we do, because sitting here asking for answers on why we didn't win on the road this year, in the playoffs, all those kind of things. No one has the answers to that yet. Like that's if you had the answer, we would have, it would have been switched in, whatever situation. So, just that, again, I thank him and his staff for, a tremendous work that they put in this year.
Hey guys. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, I was going to say you're so generous with time or what have you, but there's like things we have, Samberg.
Sure. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Again, every summer is important, and we've got obviously a couple of RFAs. You touched on a little bit of the UFA. Mason Appleton's a UFA as well. We'll have to have obviously different conversations within the organization on some of the younger players, within the organization to see where they're at. Do we have pro scouting meetings coming up here next week, Wednesday, Thursday. Obviously Larry Simmons is an integral part of starting the contract negotiations, with the different players. Spoke to Gabe, spoke to Sammy. Both of them were in exits, here today. And I think the exciting thing for us is that we have some of those kind of players that, are on this side of the 30, plus years. And those are the guys that have capacity to grow. So those are some of the guys that we challenged, kind of the most. The contracts and that's going to take care of itself. We'll work on that. We'll find a way to find common ground. But those are the guys that we're challenging. And we challenged Samberg last year, obviously saying, look, Brendan Dillon's not coming back. Now's your time, and he took that step. So those are things that again, as an organization, proud of. Morgan Barron went from wing to center this year. Those are interesting things that again, as a group, we're going to have to sit back and talk about. The business side of it, finds a way to take care of itself, and whatever the cards are dealt, with respect to UFAs and finding a way to keep them or not, we'll deal with it.
Just one final one on that, but we talked to Adam obviously this morning, and he said he wants to be a Winnipeg Jet for life.
Yeah.
I imagine the feeling is extremely mutual. He does have the one more year,
Yeah.
but as does Kyle. But would those be things maybe later in the summer you'd be turning your minds to?
Yeah, no, actually, right now we've turned our minds to it. Again, I'm very open to both of those guys in their conversations. That I believe they're a big part of our success, and want to keep it that way. And again, timing's different for every single player. Chuckled with Laus this morning here when I told him that obviously I'd like to get to him sooner rather than later. Last time when we did an extension with him, I called him, I think, a week before the deadline, and his heart sank. He thought he was getting traded, and so I said, I don't want to put you through that, but it takes both sides to make deals, and there's timing, and it's not necessarily always just timing within your own group. There's timing of what happens around the league and stuff like that too. So I guess I just caution everybody, don't read into anything sometimes if timing's slow or fast, but very, very open. Like I think the world of KC, and I think the world obviously of Laos. Again, the leadership, like he is Winnipeg. He is what it embodies, and but again, like, it is that for us, for me, and it's kind of what helps drive me is, I said the same thing to Helly. He said the same thing to Scheif. Like, we were lucky enough to call your name, on the draft floor, and we were exceptionally lucky that, you put the time in your own game to become the player that you are, and then, you committed to us, and I commit to them that, I'm going to do everything I can, and to try. We've traded more draft picks than any other team in the league, I think, to try to keep pushing this forward. And ownership is committed to wanting to do that. That's what drives Mark Chipman, David Thompson. We have board meetings. We had board meetings there just before the trade deadline, and I hijack them all the time because they want to sit and talk about, like, the growth of these players, the young guys, the building, and hopefully culminating in something. So again, it's a great organization to be a part of because they care. It's even a better part of being in Winnipeg because, like I've said to many of these people that texted me, like, I'm proud to be a Winnipegger for what I've seen, from not only this team, but these fans, and it's special.
Scott, I know you're not a doctor, unlike
play one on TV.
But usually postseason or post-playoff is when sometimes we hear about injuries. I don't know if you want to put names to guys or just give us an idea of maybe what some guys might have been playing through, because I suspect we heard Luke told us yesterday he had 2 cracked ribs.
Yeah.
I imagine there's other guys.
Personal.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's certainly guys. We're obviously at this time of year, you're going to be playing hurt. I mean, I think Josh mentioned it. We wouldn't have had him for the rest of the playoffs, so that was a big one, obviously. And just it was interesting, the fact, and this goes back to our group, just the injuries that happened. Not only we didn't have Gabe and Nick to start the playoffs, and then we lost Scheif and JMO in that series, but those other guys, we had guys that stepped in that hadn't even been here all year. Jad came up, and even Tony Otto, I know he was here earlier, but the guys that had to step in and play for us, and there's lots of those injuries that are, guys are, we're actually, there's some guys that have some stuff to get looked after, but at the end of the day, guys played through some stuff that that you have to play through at this time of year, and and just like a lot of during the regular season, there's some injuries that guys kind of keep away. You wonder why they're not playing at their best. We may have a little bit of more of an insight to it, and just that's hockey players. That's pro hockey. They want to play. It was a hard one. It was a hard one with Luke. It was really hard. It was a tough one because he was a guy that did not want to come out of that lineup, and it bothered him. And But that's what you expect from those kind of guys.
Is that the kind of things you were referring to when you said some things going on that we didn't know about? Or is there other things you want to elaborate on?
Yeah, not really.
It's just more like, I just think it goes back to some of the things like these guys held each other to a standard, and like that standard wasn't going to be lost, and if, again, I talked about it, in the coaching searches when we talked about it, like if you have a standard and you set it and you let it go on Tuesday, it's gone by Friday. And that group of guys, they set their standard and they were true to their word.
Okay, guys. Fortunately, I got to be on call here. So
So let the record